The calm before the storm. In the vast, cold emptiness of space, a lone human warship sat quietly, hidden among the stars. The Indomitable, a sleek and advanced vessel, drifted silently on the edge of the galaxy. Its crew was preparing for a battle they knew could be their last. Far across the stars, a Galactic Armada, an overwhelming force of thousands of alien ships, was heading toward Earth. Their mission was clear: destroy humanity. Captain Alex Riker stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his eyes fixed on the quiet blackness of space. The Armada was coming. He could feel the weight of the impending battle pressing down on him. Riker wasn't a man easily shaken, but even he couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. The enemy fleet was vast, so vast that even one of the Indomitable's weapons wouldn't make a dent. The odds were impossible. The Indomitable was the only ship standing between Earth and the Armada. No backup, no reinforcements, just the crew of a single warship. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. The crew moved with quiet urgency, making final preparations. Their hands worked swiftly, but their faces showed a mix of determination and fear. They knew what was at stake. Earth, their home, was about to be invaded by an enemy so powerful, no one had ever seen anything like it. Commander Sarah Vance, Riker's second-in-command, stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the star maps displayed on the screen. "Captain, the Armada is only a few days away. We need to make a move soon," she said, her voice calm but tense. Riker nodded, turning to face her. "I know, but we need to be smart. They have the numbers, the firepower. We only have one chance at this." The Indomitable wasn't the biggest ship in the galaxy, but it was fast and agile, built for stealth. It could sneak past enemy defenses and hit hard before the Armada even knew what happened. The ship had been built for moments like this, for desperate missions where survival seemed impossible. But even with all its advanced technology, there was no escaping the fact that they were facing an enemy 10 times their size. "Captain," said Lieutenant Tom Harris, a young officer at the weapons station, breaking the silence, "the ship is ready. Weapons are fully charged. We got our stealth systems online." Riker gave a sharp nod. "Good. Keep the sensors on high alert. We can't afford any surprises." As the crew continued their preparations, Riker stood by the large viewport, staring out at the dark void. His mind raced with thoughts of Earth, his family, his friends, the people he swore to protect. He had spent years in the military, but nothing could have prepared him for a moment like this. The thought of facing a Galactic Armada, alone, was almost too much to bear. But there was no time for doubt. The Armada would arrive soon, and he had to lead his crew into battle. The Indomitable was not just a ship, it was a symbol of humanity's last hope. It was humanity's defiance against impossible odds. For every person on that ship, their lives were now tied to the fate of Earth. The crew knew they were about to face a battle unlike any other. They would fight with everything they had, knowing that victory would mean saving billions of lives, while defeat would mean the destruction of everything they loved. Outside the ship, the stars seemed distant, indifferent to the conflict brewing within the human heart. The galaxy was vast, and to the rest of the universe, humanity was just another insignificant species. But to the crew of the Indomitable, Earth was everything. They weren't going to let anyone take it from them without a fight. A warning alarm suddenly blared across the bridge, breaking the tension. Riker's heart skipped a beat as the screen displayed the approaching fleet. Hundreds of enemy ships were coming, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. It was a sight that sent shivers down even the bravest of spines. The Armada was close, too close. "They're coming in fast," Vance said, her voice tense as she studied the radar. "At this speed, they'll be here in less than 48 hours. Riker's jaw clenched. They had no time to waste. He turned to face the crew, his voice steady but full of resolve. "Listen up, everyone. We may be outnumbered, but we have one advantage." They don't know we're here. The Indomitable is the best stealth ship ever built, and we're going to use that to our advantage. We're going to hit them hard, and we're going to hit them fast. This is our only shot." The crew nodded, their faces hardening with determination. They weren't just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for humanity's future. As the Indomitable began to move, slipping through the stars like a shadow, Riker couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The battle ahead would determine the fate of the entire human race. But even with the odds stacked against them, he knew one thing: humanity would never go down without a fight. In the distance, the Armada continued its approach, oblivious to the small warship lurking in the shadows. The Indomitable was ready, and its crew was prepared to give everything they had. But would it be enough? A hero's call to action. The silence that filled the bridge of the Indomitable was deafening. Despite all the noise of the ship's systems humming and clicking away, it felt as though the whole universe had held its breath. Captain Riker stood at the center of it all, his gaze never wavering from the screens before him. The Armada was coming. It was only a matter of time. The crew had been busy preparing for the worst. Lieutenant Harris had already double-checked the weapons systems, ensuring that everything was in place. Commander Vance was keeping an eye on the stealth technology, making sure the Indomitable stayed hidden for as long as possible. Yet, as the crew worked diligently, the weight of the situation hung heavy over them all. Captain Riker had seen war before, but never anything like this. His mind drifted back to Earth, the memories of peaceful days and the people he loved, faces he may never see again. He closed his eyes for just a moment, remembering why he had volunteered for this mission in the first place. Humanity was more than just a species. It was his family, his home, everything. And if it came down to his life or theirs, he wouldn't hesitate. He'd sacrifice everything to protect the future of humanity. Riker straightened up, his eyes sharp as he turned to face the crew. The time for preparation was over. The Armada was drawing closer by the second. The Indomitable was ready, but were the crew? "Gather around," Riker commanded, his voice booming across the bridge. One by one, his officers stopped their work and came to him. Their faces were a mixture of determination, fear, and exhaustion. Everyone knew what was at stake. They didn't need to be reminded that they were facing impossible odds. Riker knew, however, that he needed to remind them of why they were there, why they were fighting. "Listen up," he began, locking eyes with each person in the room. "What we're about to do is insane. There's no sugarcoating it. We're up against an enemy unlike any we've ever seen before. They have the numbers, the power, the ships. But we have something they don't." The crew looked at him, some nodding, others still unsure of what to expect. Riker's voice softened, his expression full of conviction. "We have each other. We have Earth. We have humanity's will to survive. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everything we've ever known, everything we've ever loved. And I know none of you will back down." Commander Vance stepped forward, her normally calm face a mask of steel. "Captain, what's the plan? How do we take down an Armada with just one ship?" Riker smiled, though it was grim. "That's the beauty of it, Sarah. We don't need to take them all down. We just need to hit them where it hurts. Hard and fast. One blow, one attack, and we'll show them that humanity is not to be underestimated." Harris chimed in, his voice tense with excitement. "I've got the perfect angle lined up. If we take out their communication hub, they'll be blind. They'll have no way of coordinating their forces, and we can pick them off one by one." Riker nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We take out their communications, and we strike with everything we've got. The first blow has to be one they'll never forget." The officers exchanged glances, their nerves starting to settle. The plan was risky, but it was the only plan they had. And Riker knew something that the rest of the galaxy didn't. Humans were resilient. If they were given the chance, they would fight tooth and nail for survival. The Indomitable wasn't just a ship, it was the last hope of humanity. Riker turned back to the viewport, his eyes narrowing. He could see the Armada's fleet now, more clearly than ever. The massive ships were like floating mountains, their guns bristling with destructive power. They moved as one, an unstoppable force headed directly toward Earth. But the Indomitable wasn't afraid. It moved like a shadow, slipping between the gaps in the Armada's formation. They couldn't see the ship, yet. The crew of the Indomitable had one advantage: the element of surprise. But it wouldn't last forever. Once they fired their first shot, they would be discovered. That was the risk they had to take. The plan had to be executed perfectly, or they'd be wiped out before they could even land a blow. "Helmsman," Riker called, his voice steady. "Take us into position. We're moving out. Prepare for the first strike." The crew scrambled to their stations, their movements quick and efficient. Every moment now was precious. The Indomitable's engines roared to life as the ship shifted silently into position, weaving through the stars, staying hidden in the shadows of larger asteroids. As the Indomitable drew closer to the heart of the Armada, Riker's heart pounded in his chest. He had no doubt that they were about to face an enemy far stronger than anything they had ever fought. But in his heart, he also knew that this was humanity's chance to prove something to the galaxy. To prove that no matter how small or outnumbered they were, humanity would never be the underdog again. The countdown began. 5 seconds to target, said the weapons officer, his voice calm but tense. Riker's eyes narrowed. This was it. The Indomitable would make its mark today, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. His grip tightened on the console, and the words he spoke were clear and resolute. "Ready, fire." The first strike. The sound of the weapon's charge filled the bridge of the Indomitable like the steady hum of a heartbeat. The ship had positioned itself in the perfect spot, just within range of the Armada's command vessel, but still cloaked by the asteroid field. It was a perfect moment of silence before the chaos that would inevitably follow. Captain Riker stood still, his fingers lightly brushing the edge of the console, feeling the cool metal under his fingertips. The tension in the air was so thick, you could almost feel it pressing against your chest. His eyes, focused and determined, flicked from screen to screen, taking in every detail of the fleet's movements. He could see the gigantic ships, massive and unyielding, their silhouette sharp against the endless stretch of stars. They had no idea the Indomitable was there. The plan had been laid out clearly. They would strike fast and hard, taking down the communications hub of the enemy fleet. If they could disable the Armada's ability to coordinate, even for a few precious minutes, they might stand a chance. But one mistake, one misstep, and the battle would be over before it even began. "Captain," Commander Vance said, her voice breaking the silence. "We're in position. The comms hub is in our sights. The first strike is ready." Riker's eyes never left the screens. He knew the plan was solid, but the real question was whether or not they could pull it off. His crew was capable, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned. It was the ultimate test of their skills, their resolve, and their ability to push through the impossible. "All right," Riker said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We hit them hard. No hesitation. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The weapons officer's voice echoed through the bridge as the ship's main guns powered up, sending a pulse of energy toward the massive command ship at the heart of the Armada. Time seemed to slow as the beam raced through the void. The moment stretched, an endless second of anticipation. Then, the Indomitable shook as the shot connected with the enemy ship, sending a shockwave of light into the surrounding space. For a brief moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, chaos erupted. The enemy command ship staggered, its shields flickering violently before collapsing entirely. The massive vessel veered off course, its once perfect formation broken. The Armada's communications scrambled, signals cutting in and out as the disruption spread like a virus through their network. Riker watched as the enemy fleet's movement slowed, their ships clashing in confusion as they tried to regain their bearings. "Target locked on enemy fleet," "Captain," Harris reported, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "They're blind. We've got them." Riker's pulse quickened. The first strike had landed, and it was working. The Indomitable had made its mark. But they couldn't stop now. This was the window they needed. One small window of chaos where they could do more damage before the enemy regained their strength. "Ready the next shot," Riker commanded, his voice hard with focus. "Take out their secondary command ships. We need to keep them disoriented." The crew didn't hesitate. Every action was fluid, precise, and calculated. The Indomitable's weapons hummed as the second barrage prepared, the crew working together in perfect synchrony. The ship moved like a predator, dodging through asteroid fields and moving between ships, always staying one step ahead. But the enemy was starting to react. The fleet's main ship had already sent out a distress signal, and other vessels were quickly closing in. Soon, they would regain their coordination, and the advantage the Indomitable had fought for would start to slip away. Riker had no illusions about that. This moment of confusion was just that. A moment, a brief window before the full might of the Armada was turned on them. "We don't have much time," Vance said, her eyes scanning the tactical display. "They're starting to regroup." Riker's gaze narrowed. He could already see the enemy fleet responding. The Armada wasn't a collection of random ships. It was a unified, well-trained force with years of experience in battle. They would recover quickly from the initial shock, and when they did, the Indomitable would be outnumbered and surrounded. He needed to act fast. Initiating evasive maneuvers, Riker ordered, as the Indomitable lurched, twisting and turning to avoid the oncoming fire. The ship was built for speed, its sleek hull slicing through the stars as it raced to reposition for another strike. The second barrage hit, this time targeting a fleet of smaller ships, and the resulting explosion sent a ripple of destruction through the Armada's ranks. But just as quickly, the larger warships began to close in, their guns firing with devastating precision. "Shields at 60%. The tactical officer called out. "We need to fall back." "No," Riker barked, cutting him off. "We push forward. We fight with everything we have. This is our moment. Let them know what happens when they mess with humanity." The bridge fell silent for a heartbeat, the crew staring at their captain. They could feel the raw intensity of his words. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a statement. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to show the universe that they weren't to be ignored, that Earth would never back down. The Indomitable surged forward, cutting through the Armada with renewed fury. The ship's weapons fired relentlessly, each shot a defiant cry into the vastness of space. Every shot was a testament to the spirit of humanity, that no matter the odds, no matter how impossible the task, they would always fight. The Armada's ships loomed larger as the Indomitable darted between them, its sleek frame barely visible against the stars. They could feel the battle turning. The enemy fleet was responding, their weapons systems locking onto the smaller human ship. But the Indomitable wasn't going to make it easy. "Brace for impact," Riker shouted as a massive blast rocked the ship, throwing the crew forward. The ship groaned under the force, but it stayed intact, its hull holding strong. "Damage report," Riker demanded, his voice sharp. "We're holding together, Captain," Vance replied. "But we need to finish this now before they regroup." Riker's eyes locked onto the screen. The Indomitable had dealt a heavy blow, but the fight was far from over. And with every passing second, the question loomed larger. Would humanity's lone warship hold its ground against an entire armada? The tide turns. The Indomitable rocked violently as another barrage of enemy fire hit the shields. Sparks flew from the consoles as the ship groaned under the weight of the assault. But Captain Riker didn't flinch. His focus never wavered. The enemy fleet was closing in, and the Indomitable was outnumbered more than 10-1. Yet the battle was far from lost. This was humanity's fight, and they would not be so easily crushed. "Shields at 45%, Captain," Vance shouted, her voice tight with concern. "We need to pull back." Riker's jaw clenched. The time to retreat was long gone. "We don't pull back, Commander. Not today." He stood tall, staring at the glowing map of the battlefield, where enemy ships surrounded them from all sides. His mind raced through possibilities. Evading wasn't an option anymore, and neither was running. It was time to take the fight to the enemy in a way they never expected. "Plot an aggressive course," he ordered. "We're going straight into their command cluster." There was a moment of stunned silence across the bridge. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but Riker's eyes never left the tactical map. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. "Captain, the risk is too high." Harris, the weapons officer, protested. "The Indomitable can't take much more." "We don't have a choice," Riker interrupted. His gaze turned toward the nearest enemy ship, a hulking beast of metal and firepower. "That command ship must go down, or this entire fleet will crush us all." Vance hesitated for only a heartbeat before nodding. "Understood. Plotting course now." The Indomitable turned with deadly precision, its engines roaring to life as the ship's sleek form shot through space, heading straight into the heart of the enemy's formation. The enemy fleet, still reeling from the initial shock of the earlier attacks, struggled to adjust. Their communication systems, though partially repaired, were still fractured, and their ships were slower to react than they should have been. "Prepare for high-speed combat maneuvers," Riker ordered. "Weapons officer, target the command ship. Full power to the forward cannons." The Indomitable's engines flared as the ship surged forward, cutting through the black void like a predator hunting its prey. The crew braced themselves as the ship lurched and twisted, dodging enemy fire with breathtaking agility. The Indomitable was small compared to the giant warships of the Armada, but it was fast, nimble, and deadly. It was humanity's greatest weapon, and Riker had every intention of using it to its fullest. "Incoming fire from the left," Vance shouted, her voice sharp. "Brace for impact." The ship shuddered violently as the enemy fire collided with the shields. Sparks exploded from the consoles, and the lights flickered. The crew gasped, but Riker's face remained impassive. He could feel the heat from the blast in his bones, but he didn't give an inch. "Return fire," he commanded. The Indomitable's weapons roared to life, sending pulse after pulse of devastating energy into the enemy fleet. The first blast hit the command ship square in the center, its shields collapsing under the force. The ship staggered, its engine sputtering as it tried to regain control. The Indomitable's next shot hit another warship nearby, causing a chain reaction that tore through the Armada's ranks. "Direct hit," Harris shouted, his voice filled with triumph. "We've breached their defenses. Keep pushing," Riker shouted back. He wasn't finished yet. The crew's hearts raced as the battle raged on. Every shot, every move, seemed to pull them closer to the edge of success or failure. The Indomitable was taking heavy fire, and yet it fought on, a testament to the determination of its crew and the indomitable will of humanity. The enemy's coordination was slipping, but they were adapting. The larger warships were beginning to focus their fire on the Indomitable, realizing it was the only real threat left. "Shields at 20%, Vance reported, her voice strained. "We're running out of time, Captain." Riker didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the battlefield, assessing the situation with cold precision. The Indomitable was battered, but it wasn't finished yet. The enemy command ship was still vulnerable, and the fleet was scattered. It was now or never. "We're going in for the final strike," Riker said, his voice resolute. "Target the command ship's engines. We cripple them, and the rest of the Armada will fall apart." The ship surged forward again, diving into the heart of the enemy's formation. The Indomitable dodged fire, weaving between massive ships, each move calculated, each shot fired with purpose. The crew worked together, each one pushing their limits, driven by the belief that they could win this fight. Target locked, Harris shouted, firing in 3, 2, 1. The beam fired, cutting through the void like a bolt of lightning. It struck the enemy command ship's engine core, and the resulting explosion sent shockwaves rippling through the Armada. The massive vessel staggered, its engines dying, and its weapons went silent. The enemy fleet fell into chaos as the command ship crumpled, and their ships began to lose their coordination. Riker could see it happening. Their momentum was gone. They were scattered, confused, and vulnerable. "Now, Commander," Riker shouted, "take them down." The Indomitable moved with precision, its guns firing relentlessly as it cut through the remaining enemy vessels, one by one. The battle was turning, the tide finally shifting in humanity's favor. As the last of the enemy ships fell, silence descended on the battlefield. The Indomitable hovered in the wreckage of the Armada, its crew battered but triumphant. They had done the impossible. They had faced down a galactic force and emerged victorious. Riker stood on the bridge, watching the stars flicker on the view screen. His heart was pounding, but there was no joy in it. Not yet. This victory was just the beginning. The galaxy would know the name Indomitable, and humanity would not be forgotten. The aftermath and the price of victory. The silence after the battle was deafening. The Indomitable drifted alone in the cold expanse of space, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a formidable Galactic Armada. The crew stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. Against all odds, they had won. Humanity had stood alone against an unstoppable force and had emerged victorious. Yet, amidst the triumph, there was something unsettling in the air. The cost had been high. "Captain," Vance's voice broke the silence. She was standing at her console, staring at the dimmed tactical screen. "We've taken out their command ship, but we're still picking up distress signals from the wreckage. The enemy may be broken, but there are still survivors. Lots of them." Riker's gaze shifted to the view screen. The remains of the Armada, once a powerful symbol of the Galactic Empire, now floated like debris. The wrecks of dozens of ships, broken apart and floating aimlessly, made the cold emptiness of space feel even more distant. There was no joy in their destruction, only a grim realization that this was the result of a war that had taken far more than it had given. "I know," Riker replied, his voice low. "We've won, but at what cost? There's still much to be done." "Captain, I'm picking up something else," Harris said, his voice tight with uncertainty. "There's another fleet on the way. It's far larger than the one we just fought." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Just when they thought they were finished, when they thought the battle was won, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Riker's eyes narrowed as he turned toward the tactical map, where a new set of red blips appeared, blinking ominously in the distance. This was no small fleet. It was a force that could obliterate the Indomitable in minutes, and it was coming fast. "How long until they arrive?" Riker asked. "At current speed, they'll be here in less than 2 hours," Vance answered. "This is a full-scale response. We've stirred up something much bigger than we expected." Riker's mind raced. He had known this moment might come. He had always understood that defeating the Armada wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Humanity had proven itself on the battlefield, but they were now facing something far worse than they could have ever imagined. "We won't make it back to Earth in time," Riker said quietly, "and we can't fight them head-on. Not with just one ship." His crew stared at him, waiting for orders, waiting for the next move. "We have to find a way to survive long enough to warn the others," Riker continued, his mind already working through possible strategies. "We need to buy time. Find a way to slow them down before they reach the core systems." "But, Captain," Vance hesitated, her brow furrowing, "we've taken severe damage. The Indomitable can't take much more. We're already running on fumes. And the enemy, they'll overwhelm us. What's left to do?" Riker's voice was calm but unwavering. "We fight. We don't stop. And we do it on our terms. Captain, We can't." "Yes, we can," Riker interrupted firmly, his gaze hardening. "Humanity has always fought against impossible odds. That's who we are. We won't run. Not now. Not ever." The crew fell silent. There was no more arguing. Riker had made his decision, and in the eyes of his crew, that was enough. They were in this together. They had fought through the impossible, and now they would face the next challenge with the same unshakable resolve. The crew worked in unison, their actions sharp and precise as they began to make preparations for the next phase. The Indomitable was battered and bruised, but it was still a weapon of unimaginable power. The odds were against them, but that was a situation humanity knew all too well. "We can't afford to make mistakes," Riker said, his eyes scanning the damage reports. "We need to be ready for anything. Commander Vance, prepare the secondary systems. Harris, I want our weapons primed and ready. We're going to make sure the enemy feels every shot." As the crew scrambled to ready the ship for the next confrontation, Riker turned to the view screen once more. The fleet approaching them was immense, far beyond anything they had faced before, but there was no fear in his heart. Fear had never been a luxury for humanity. It was only a fuel for the fire that burned inside them, the fire that had carried them through the darkest of times. "Get ready, everyone," Riker said, his voice carrying the weight of a leader who had seen both victory and loss. "This is our moment. We've already proven we can take on the impossible. Now it's time to prove that nothing, no force, no empire, can stand against humanity. Not today." With a final, resolute look at the incoming fleet, the Indomitable surged forward once more. The crew stood ready, prepared for whatever came next. They had no delusions about what lay ahead, but one thing was clear: humanity would never go down without a fight. The final stand. As the seconds ticked away, the Indomitable floated like a silent predator in the vast emptiness of space, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. The damage to the warship was extensive, and the crew was exhausted, but there was no turning back now. The enemy fleet was too close. Soon, it would be within firing range. Riker's mind raced, trying to find any advantage they could exploit, anything that might give them the edge against this overwhelming force. "Captain," Vance's voice broke through his thoughts. "I've rerouted the remaining power to the shields, but we can't hold up against a fleet of that size for long. Our weapons systems are barely functional. If they engage us directly, we'll be done in minutes." Riker stared at the view screen, where the approaching fleet was now clearly visible, a monstrous armada, each ship more massive than the last. The odds were insurmountable. The Indomitable could hold its ground for a time, but the enemy was coming at full force, and they knew exactly where to strike. This was no longer about winning. It was about survival. A sense of grim acceptance settled over Riker. He had always known that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to survive, no matter the odds. He knew this fight was no different. It was a war for humanity's future, and if they were going to lose, they would make sure the galaxy remembered the price of crossing humanity. "We fight smarter," Riker finally said, his voice cold with determination. "We may be outgunned, but we still have our wits, and we can use them. Harris, can we use the asteroid field ahead as cover? We need to create some distance, get them off our tail long enough to regroup." Harris, his face grim but focused, nodded. "We can do that, Captain. But we'll need to use it strategically. The enemy won't be fooled easily. They'll be expecting a trick." Riker's eyes gleamed with a new sense of purpose. "Then we'll give them a trick they'll never see coming." The crew moved swiftly, working in harmony to set their plan into motion. The asteroid field ahead was dense, and while it would provide some cover, it was also a double-edged sword. The rocks could easily damage the Indomitable if they weren't careful, but Riker had made up his mind. He would rather risk the terrain than face the full brunt of the enemy's assault. "All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers," Riker ordered. "We're going to lead them into the field. Stay sharp, everyone. The moment we enter, We'll be blind. I'm counting on you to keep us alive." The Indomitable roared to life, its engine sputtering as they pushed the ship to its limits. As they approached the asteroid field, Riker's hand tightened around the armrest of his chair, his eyes fixed on the glowing red markers of the enemy fleet closing in. The time for subtlety had passed. Now it was about sheer force, raw cunning, and the will to survive. Without warning, the Indomitable broke into a sharp left turn, diving toward the asteroid field. The enemy fleet was close behind, but Riker knew they would hesitate, unsure of the treacherous terrain. It was their one chance. Initiating evasive pattern, Vance called out, her hands flying over the controls as the ship lurched to the side, narrowly avoiding a collision with a massive asteroid. The field was dense, filled with rocks of all sizes, and the Indomitable had to weave between them, dodging larger asteroids that threatened to rip the ship apart. The crew held their breath as the ship ducked and swerved, narrowly avoiding the crushing impact of each obstacle. The enemy fleet, larger and slower, hesitated as they entered the field, giving the Indomitable a precious few moments to regroup. "We're losing them," Harris said, his voice filled with relief. "They're having trouble keeping up in this mess." Riker felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, they had the upper hand, but only for a moment. The asteroid field was no sanctuary. It was just a temporary solution. The enemy would adapt, and when they did, the battle would be back on. And this time, they might not be so lucky. Suddenly, an alert blared from the console. A new set of readings appeared on the tactical screen, reinforcements. A second wave of enemy ships had entered the field, cutting off their escape routes. Riker's heart sank. They were trapped. "We're out of options," Vance said, her voice steady, but Riker could hear the strain in it. "We've got the field between us, but it won't hold them forever." Riker's mind raced. The only way out now was through. They had one last card to play. The Indomitable's engines had one more burst of power left in them, a final maneuver that could buy them just enough time to break through the enemy line. "Prepare for a full power jump," Riker commanded. "We're going to push this ship past its limits. We'll make a break for it." No hesitation. The crew exchanged a look, unsure, but resolute. They had been through too much to stop now. With one last, desperate push, the Indomitable surged forward, blasting through the asteroid field like a bullet. The crew held on as the ship shook violently from the stress, the hull groaning under the strain. The engine's power was at its peak, and it was all or nothing. "Now," Riker shouted, as the Indomitable shot forward, breaking through the outer perimeter of the enemy fleet. The enemy ships had been caught off guard, their targeting systems scrambling as the human warship barreled through their defenses. The gamble paid off. The Indomitable tore through the heart of the enemy armada, breaking their formation and causing chaos in their ranks. The warship's weapons fired one last time, taking out several enemy ships in a final flurry of destruction. But the Indomitable wasn't done yet. They still had a chance. Humanity was not going to go down quietly. Not now, not ever. The final stand had begun. The human spark. As the Indomitable shot forward, breaking through the chaos of the enemy's armada, the crew was suspended in a breathless moment of defiance. They had done the impossible. They had broken through. But the battle was far from over. The ship groaned with the strain of the last maneuver. The blast shields flickered, power was fluctuating, and the once thriving hum of the engines was now a faint whisper. Every officer aboard the Indomitable knew that this moment of success came with a heavy price. But there was no room for regret now. The enemy fleet was closing in, faster than ever. The momentary disruption caused by their sudden breach wouldn't last long. They had mere minutes, seconds, even, to turn the tide. "Captain," Vance's voice was sharp, urgent. "We can't keep this up. We need a more permanent solution. The reinforcements are catching up. We're in their sights again." Riker's mind raced. He needed to think of something. Anything that would give them the time they desperately needed. But the more he thought, the clearer it became. This battle, this war, was never about firepower alone. It was about ingenuity, willpower, and the unexpected strengths of humanity. Riker gripped the armrests of his command chair, looking out the view screen. He saw the massive enemy ships closing in like a hammer. They were unstoppable, vast, and their weapons systems were more advanced than anything the Indomitable had. Yet, Riker had something they didn't, a mind sharp enough to see the impossible. Vance, initiate the secondary plan. Harris, bring us to full speed. This is going to be tight, Riker ordered, his voice calm despite the situation. And everyone, brace yourselves. This is going to get interesting. He knew what he had to do. The Indomitable might not have the firepower to match the enemy's fleet, but it had something much more powerful, an understanding of the enemy's overconfidence. Now, Riker said as the ship shifted into high gear, a fresh surge of power flooding the engines. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. The Indomitable dove toward the heart of the enemy fleet, an act that would seem suicidal to any other commander. But to Riker, it was the ultimate move. The enemy ships, still disoriented by their earlier chaos, did not expect this. They had anticipated the Indomitable trying to escape or regroup. Instead, the human warship was making a desperate dive into the heart of their strength. Fire all remaining pulse cannons, Riker commanded, his voice steady, filled with purpose. In the heat of the moment, the Indomitable's weapons fired in a single massive pulse, sending shockwaves through the hull of the closest enemy ship. The blast wasn't enough to destroy the colossal warship, but it was enough to rattle it. The enemy fleet had assumed that their size and power made them invulnerable. That confidence was shattered as the Indomitable rushed forward with reckless speed, firing every last weapon in their arsenal. It was a shot of defiance, a declaration to the universe that humanity, against all odds, would never simply bow down. "We've got their attention now," Vance said with a sharp smile. "But they won't fall for it again." The ships of the enemy fleet adjusted their trajectory, their cannons firing in retaliation. But Riker's plan was already in motion. The Indomitable had become a moving target, too quick and erratic for the enemy to hit with precision. It wasn't the most efficient strategy, but it was one that bought them precious moments. "What's next, Captain?" Harris asked, watching as the remaining enemy ships scrambled to reform their ranks. "We don't run. We don't hide," Riker replied, his voice full of resolve. "We're going to make them regret ever setting foot in this galaxy." They had reached the core of the enemy fleet now. The battle was close. So close that every second felt like an eternity. Riker's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. He knew what he needed to do. Without a second thought, he gave the order. "Engage emergency warp drive. We're taking them to the heart of their own forces." It was a gamble, but there was no turning back now. The Indomitable surged forward, warping through space at an impossibly fast speed, bypassing the enemy fleet with blinding speed. It wasn't a complete escape. The ship would still be under fire, but the warp would place them in the midst of the enemy's command center. The one place they'd never expect a human warship to go. The stars outside the Indomitable warped as the ship entered its final warp jump. For a moment, everything was silent, the noise of battle muted by the overwhelming speed. Then, with a sudden, violent burst of light, the Indomitable reappeared, right in the heart of the enemy's command fleet. The enemy ships were stunned. They had never expected humanity to make such a bold move, to jump into the very center of their strength, where their leadership sat, vulnerable. The Indomitable was now among the enemy's most important vessels, and the crew knew it was a matter of seconds before the enemy retaliated. But Riker didn't hesitate. All weapons, fire. In an instant, the Indomitable's remaining weapons unleashed hell upon the enemy's core ships. Each shot was a calculated risk, each explosion a message. "You may have outnumbered us," Riker said, his voice now booming over the comms. "But we'll never surrender. This is humanity's fight, and we're here to win it." The Indomitable fired again, taking down key ships. The enemy was confused, thrown off their strategy. Riker and his crew knew that, with this final act of defiance, they had secured their place in the galaxy's history. And no matter the outcome, the universe would know that humans had the strength to rise, to fight, and to stand their ground, against any foe, against any odds.